Chapter 1. Race and Collectivism.
All news sources, videos, and imagery belongs to their respective owners, and is used in compliance to fair usage.
Hello and welcome to my platform. My name is Gershly Karen Pierre. Ironically, even with the middle name Karen, that is my actual middle name and my true fully name. And I happen to believe in marriage and the nuclear family. This from the premise of small-scale unity, and these conversations can also increase to include large-scale unity. My belief is that we don't have too many nuclear families, and instead should be flooded with homes of married families. We also need to increase our awareness of self, begin to love ourselves and each other. We have to undo so much damage because we are a very self-loathing, divided, discontented, the list goes onward population. But I want to see us rise. This particular discussion ideally can be empowering and will uplift couples, marriages, and nuclear families within our demographic. It will feature excerpts from different speakers and experts. It will feature facts tied to marriage and the family, 3 facts that I've compiled. And hopefully this will leave us feeling empowered as a demographic. We need to unite. We need to rise. We need to awaken. We need to love each other. We need to make more families. So hopefully this dialogue will help us see the virtue of ourselves as a demographic. Let us rise to the occasion.
What binds us as a population? Our shared race. Let us learn to value our shared placement in this world, so that we can be empowered and rise.
The Black race is being a part of the biggest group of people that you can otherwise be different from, while still being in an overall shared assortment. These differences are the biological sexes, male/female. So just because you're a different biological sex to someone else doesn't mean you're not the same race. These differences also include language. Just because you speak a different language doesn't mean you're not the same race. Geography is different, but you're still a part of the same race. Age, education levels, status, whatever markers of humanity you can get, you're still going to be in the same race because race is tied to our genetics, especially our phenotypic expression. It's what you have the most in common with across the rest of humanity. So just because we're all, quote, humans, doesn't mean that we're all going to relate. And then it gets interesting. Race is often defined, at least by those who, especially Black, feel like, oh, well, we're all the same, as a social construct. And you're the only one saying it's a social construct. Meanwhile, everybody else is benefiting off of this supposed construct. Benefiting in wealth, job opportunities, benefiting in any bias you can get, benefiting infrastructurally from the system that is infrastructurally dooming many Black lives. And there are different histories that we possess that I believe is more than just vanity. The history of being Black on this planet is tied to many gruesome human rights injustices, exploitation, abuse, brutality. Our lives have been often disposed of, and all in the name of what should be more than seen as a social construct. And to this day, we are living the after effects of that brutality, and even to this day are still despised because of our shared race. Our history is so detailed, immense, chaotic, and destroyed that I believe it should do more than inspire us to really understand the depths and the virtue of being in this shared race. I'll also speak on my chosen testimony, which I've shared. And in summary, when I was 16 years old, God revealed to me who Black people are. At At the time, I experienced brutal racism because of the living environment that I grew up in. I was one of 3 black students in my entire high school, and where I lived, I am a rarity, even to this day where I live. And so I've grown up in places where I am a rare person. I don't see a lot of people that look like me. And the racism was hardcore, it was overt, and it left me depressed and confused. One day as I was crying in my room, I thought to myself, why is it like this? Why does the world hate us? Just because of the color of our skin? The texture of our hair? And God said to me, do you know why it's like this? At which I stated, no. And he said to me, that's because black people are the chosen ones. That's because black people are the Israelites. And not only that, but God gave me an open vision of this young child. Well, I can't say to this day officially what country. He didn't tell me the tribe. He didn't tell me the language. But I saw this young black child with an expanded, bloated belly, and he had dirty underwear on, and he was kicking a tire as if it were a soccer ball, back and forth, just kicking this tire. And as I was watching this image, God pressed into my chest, and he stated, all black people are chosen, and all chosen people are black. So I don't believe race is a social construct. I believe it is biblical. I believe that us as the people and all of the things that we endure is biblically tied to prophecy and scripture. I believe we are a bloodline, and I believe what God said, all of the blacks are the chosen. So I believe no matter where they're located, no matter what their tribe, no matter what their language, they are the people of the Bible, and they have a history to God. And as such, I value the construction that we are in a shared identity with. This article, entitled Sesame Place Trial Over Alleged Racial Snubs by Costume Characters Delayed. Here's Why. Written on February 13th, 2023, and it's from Philly Burbs. If you ever wondered about the whole Sesame Place controversy, this article goes pretty in-depth regarding the subject. And in the section entitled, When is the trial scheduled to take place? It says, the trial was originally scheduled to begin in the U.S. District Court in Philadelphia in November, but that trial date has been pushed back to May 2024. What do you think this trial is going to look like? Do you think it's going to be in the favor of our offspring or not? And considering this, do you think more of us should get into children's media, whether it's literature, music, cartoons, different characters for our children so that they don't have to feel so left out? Ironically, if you look up the history of Sesame Street, it actually was innately created with that purpose in mind. But we need to flood the media, in my perception, with more imagery that illustrates for our families empowerment themes so that our offspring don't have to feel belittled.
Can we be of use to each other? If so, in what ways can we harvest ourselves as human resources? And if not, what's the point of belonging to a shared group? Lastly, when will we provide incentives for our population?
My belief is that we need to value our lives as human resources, because when we think of resources, we can think of land and different things that we need as humans, our material resources. But without human life, how can you then put a name to those resources? How can you put a claim to those resources? And how would those resources be otherwise utilized? Now, I don't think our lives are simply here for the sake of resource, but it is a part of our lives that contextualizes what we do, where we go, what we need. And I believe it was just as much a part of God's creation that we had those resources. But we need to begin to expand on ourselves. I know it's hard in this anti-Black and anti-Black life world to see ourselves as a resource, to see ourselves as a necessary ingredient, but it's the only life form that God chose for us. So if I was chosen to be in this body as this person, then that's by God's design. And if it is by God's design that I'm here, then I couldn't have been anything else. So if you despise the very DNA that God gave us to possess, then how else would you exist? And therefore, understanding that you are a human resource is being able to renew that resource, salvage that resource, and eventually, by the grace of God, benefit from that resource. The first reason I think we need to establish ourselves as human resources for one another is because we want and we need families. We need spouses. We need companions. So if we need things from each other that the other person possesses, and the other person has what we need. For example, let's look at the biological male/female. The men need the women for different reasons, because how else would they have someone to birth their lineages? The women need the men for different reasons, because how else are they going to even become pregnant? We need each other's DNA. Also, we need each other's affection. We need each other's presence and support, and we want to be families out of each other. So that gives us the argument of, okay, who's going to be my resource, and how can I use this person to benefit my life? But we're not just thinking that as individuals, we're thinking that by the millions and billions, because sometimes parents have more than one offspring. If one of their offspring gets married, that's great. But if they have 5 other offspring, who's going to fill that space in their offspring's life? We need to, in this crisis of lack, where we're not having as many families as we should, where we're not having as many marriages as we should, we need to really begin to put ourselves into that established mode of, okay, who's going to be the resource we could utilize to our benefit? Because if we can have these people as our resources, we get to continue our lineages. We get to keep the bloodline going. We get to survive as a collective. And then we get to also, as a resource, I believe joy is a resource. I believe excitement is a resource. I believe the good that God gives you in terms of the good emotive experiences, those are a resource. We're not supposed to be angry and suffering and rage-filled and traumatic and chaotic all the time, if at all, to be frank. Thus, being able to expand on the ideal resource of feeling, living, and of being in good mental and emotional states of being. That's what we can provide to each other as well.
Years ago, I interviewed Kwesi Mfume, then the president of the NAACP. As between the presence of white racism and the absence of black fathers, I asked him, which poses the bigger threat to the black community? Without missing a beat, he said, the absence of black fathers. It was President Barack Obama who said, we all know these statistics, that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. The Journal of Research on Adolescence confirms that even after controlling for varying levels of household income, kids in father-absent homes are more likely to end up in jail, and kids who never had a father in the house are the most likely to wind up behind bars.
Since nuclear families enhance the quality of our offspring, we need more and to majorly populate our demographic with them. There shouldn't be more single-family homes than there are nuclear family homes. Quantity equals quality here.
I believe as long as people are going to reproduce, and as long as people are going to exist, then it's not so much a matter of debate. Should they exist? Could they exist? They are. Birth rates, it's every day, essentially, that a birth is somewhere on the earth. And I know that's hard to fathom and believe, but this place didn't get to however many billions overnight. It took a lot of reproduction. And so as long as people are going to reproduce, it's not a matter of the quantity at that point. because the quantity, just by virtue of them reproducing, is going to be fulfilled. It's the quality of these lives. There has to be a perfect marriage of quality and quantity, because that's what being fruitful is. When God talked about fruitful, it wasn't just numbers. It was the good fruit that he also discusses in the scriptures. Because if you have a bunch of chaotic people existing, how can you harvest those people as resources? They're not resources that can be a catalyst into advancing our collective, but they become a weapon that can stunt the progress of our collective. So we don't want to continue to birth weapons or birth sheer destruction. We want to birth advancement. We want to birth productivity. We want to birth all the qualities as a demographic that we could benefit from. We want to birth people that will feel joyful in their lives, not the suffering and toil and pain that being alive often is, but the utter celebration of life. And that's where we qualitatively enhance ourselves as resources, by making ourselves available to each other as resources, but also in terms of availability, by shaping ourselves into a member of the Black race that we would otherwise want to see in our lives. Just like you would want a spouse that's ideal in your life, you have to become that ideal for that other person. And for every spouse that you're creating as individuals, as a collective, that's one less person that has to be alone. That's one less person that has to be sad. They have this person of their own because we became that as that resource. So reproduction should not be seen as just something that pushes forward life in this randomized context. It is contextually accurate within a qualitatively ideal goal and outcome that we will shape for ourselves. And that's where the concept of families comes in when it comes to the race.
In 1960, 5% of America's children entered the world without a mother and father married to each other. By 1980, it was 18%. By 2000, it had risen to 33%, and 15 years later, the number reached 41%. For blacks, even during slavery, when marriage for slaves was illegal, black children were more likely than today to be raised by both their mother and father. Economist Walter Williams has written that, according to census data from 1890 to 1940, a black child was more likely to grow up with married parents than a white child. For blacks, out-of-wedlock births have gone from 25% in 1965 to 73% in 2015. For whites, from less than 5% to over 25%, and for Hispanics, out-of-wedlock births have risen to 53%. In 1985, the Los Angeles Times asked both the poor and the non-poor whether poor women often have children to get additional benefits. Most of the non-poor respondents said no. However, 64% of poor respondents said yes. Now, who do you think is in a better position to know? Tupac Shakur, the late rapper, once said, "I know for a fact that had I had a father, I'd have some discipline, I'd have more confidence." He admitted he began running with gangs because he wanted the things a father gives to a child, especially to a boy: structure and protection. "Your mother cannot calm you down the way a man can," Shakur said. "You need a man to teach you how to be a man." In my book, Dear Father, Dear Son, I write about my rough, tough World War II Marine Staff Sergeant dad. Born in the Jim Crow South of Athens, Georgia, he was 14 at the start of the Great Depression. Growing up, I watched my father work 2 full-time jobs as a janitor. He also cooked for a rich family on the weekends and somehow managed to go to night school to get his GED. When I was 10, my father opened a small restaurant that he ran until he retired in his mid-80s. He was never angry or bitter and insisted that today's America was very different from the world of racial segregation and limited opportunity in which he grew up. "Hard work wins," he told me and my brothers. You get out of life what you put into it. You can't control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before blaming other people, go to the nearest mirror and ask yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? This advice shaped my life. Fathers matter. Until we have a government policy that makes that its first priority, nothing will change. I'm Larry Elder for Prager University.
The African American family, one could say, is in deep trouble. Again, there will be pushback. People will say, why do you judge family by a single norm? They will say it takes a village to raise a child. Why should we think in terms of patrimony, patriarchy, I should say, and in terms of the nuclear family as the only model? I don't want to waste my time with those arguments. I simply want to call attention to the needs of young people that have stable social foundations within the context of which they can mature and realize their human potential. And I want to say that a mother and father raising children is a sounder foundation to that end than is a mother raising those children alone.
What can we do to shift the cynical anti-marriage approach in our demographic? Our values, art, promotion, and actions influence our outcomes.
That I believe the black family is currently the least valued, least supported, least promoted, least uplifted, and it is the least created. Not because it should be, but because within ourselves, there's a lot of anti-life and anti-thinking patterns. Whether it's anti-marriage, anti-family, anti-the opposite sex, anti-your very looks, anti-other people's looks that God created us to be. And so with all this anti-thinking patterns, there's not enough pro. There's not enough pro the family, not enough pro marriage, not enough value systems that are going to actually propel people to say, you know what, we need more. And since there's not enough of that, that's going to incentivize the thing that you despise. So if you're anti something, you're incentivizing being anti. But if you're pro something, you're incentivizing being pro. So if I'm pro-marriage, I'm incentivizing the value of marriage. If I'm pro-marriage, I see the good that marriage creates. If I'm pro-marriage, then I have to promote and uplift it and support it. And I have to get my mind to be leaning towards it. The ultra-cynicism that we display as a demographic is only pushing us in that cynical approach. And I don't know if you expect it's just going to wake up, people are going to say, oh, well, I just need to get married. If you tell them all the time why they shouldn't, how are they going to wake up and say, oh, well, I should? We have to feed each other's minds so we can make that complex of people saying, you know what, I want this thing. That's why when we go into the scriptures, God is ultra pro-marriage. Ultra. And I'm not talking about the scriptures where people spoke as a representation of what they felt God said. Because even they put disclaimers. Like Paul, he had to put a disclaimer. He said, God did not tell me. And then he would say, oh, I wish people could be single. But he made that disclaimer first. He didn't say God told him that, because when God spoke about marriage, God was often pushing people in the direction of becoming married. When he would say things like, marriage is a good thing, that's God incentivizing marriage, so that your mind can say, oh, well, God said it's good, so I should do it. When God said that marriage is honorable, your mind should be like, oh, well, God said it's honorable, that means I should do it. And since I'm a believer in God, the God of the Bible, I'm not going to sit here and be anti the thing he created and that he pushed. If he said it was good, if he said it was honorable, then I will lean in that direction as his child. I'm not going to be anti-marriage. I'm not going to tell people why they should not get married, give you a dissertation of why it's not a good thing. God is the final author on that. He's the ultimate creator. He's all-knowing. He's the creator of the known and the unknown. He is God. So if God said it, I'm going to listen to him. The only reason why we say otherwise is because, like Jesus said in the Bible, it's because of the hardness of your hearts. That's why divorce was even created, because of the hardness of our hearts. That's it. It had nothing to do with how God designed it to be. It's our own wickedness and our own ability to comply to God's order. That's what makes marriage seem like it's a bad thing. But marriage was always God's design. Thus, I'm going to have to feed into that complex. And if it's hard to understand why, we have to learn why God initiated it. We have to learn why God created it. We have to learn why God did any of the functions that he wanted us to be. And see, what you're trained to do when you're black is you're trained to hate everything black. You're trained to hate your hair texture, your skin tones, the shape of everything in your face, the shape of everything throughout our bodies, so on and so forth. We're trained to hate all of these things. And how is that going to incentivize reproduction, marriage, family? So we got to unlearn that hate and see it the way God initialized.
I mention this because we're talking about family life. We're talking about intimate personal relations. I'm arguing that inequality to some degree is the consequence of a failure or a dysfunction in the family lives of Black people. I'm a Black person myself. I don't take any pleasure in making this argument. I feel compelled to make it. But in doing so, I don't want to join a chorus of critics who stand on the outside and point fingers at those people and talk about their deficiencies. I don't want to be a hypocritical moralist who wags my finger in their faces and tell them that they should live, quote, better, close quote. But I do want to be a realist. I don't want to look away from the consequences of the way in which many of them are, as a matter of fact, living. In doing so, however, I don't want to give license to those who want to wipe their hands of the matter, turn their backs on these people who need our help, and simply go on about their business. And so that's why I asked the question, who are we here in America? My point is that these problems, including the problems of African-American family life, are quintessentially an American affair, not simply a measure of the inadequacy of Black culture. They reflect upon our social inadequacy, I wish to argue. And by our, I mean all of us. For example, much of the decline in the structure of African-American family, I say decline because I mean the rise of out-of-wedlock birth and the decline in the prevalence of husband-wife households, much of that decline, I think, can be laid at the feet of the consequences of American welfare policy, which has created incentives for family dissolution. Much of it, I think, could be laid at the feet of drifts in American culture, in which the virtues of monogamous and husband-wife families has declined amongst all groups, reflected in the popular media and so forth. Black people in the United States are not on an island. They live integrated within the larger social fabric. And so patterns of behavior that we see among them are not simply on them, they are also, to some degree, on us. This is what I mean when, being an economist, I nevertheless insist on placing relations before transactions. What I am talking about now, in other words, is the American story, not just the Black American story.
How should we define race? How can we benefit from our race? How can we create support systems through race? Remember, we are not alone, but when we are so divided, it feels as if we are cut from the outside world or from benefiting from our fellow group.
My belief is that it should not just be race, as in a numerical proportion, but we have to, as a race, marry the quantity with the quality so that we don't have just a bunch of people existing and they are situationally similar. Rather, we need these people to be qualitatively trained to perceive the value of their lives, rather than being, quote, race, and that's it. What do we, like a series of asterisks, define as race? So to me, race is what? And then that should be a longer list, because the more you know why you're in this shared group, and the more you begin to value and harvest what it means to be in that shared group, once again, the more incentive and value placed on the lives within that group. So in my viewpoint, it shouldn't just be race, but a race of families, so that I know you because I'm somehow part of you in some effort-based way. If this is a race of families, rather than disjointed figures who randomly exist or who are chaotically bound, there is more of a positive interpretation within that. If it's a race of families, that means you were bound through merging. That means through intentional binding, you became one. That means your reproduction was tied to choice, planning, desire, support, because that's what family and marriage is. So being a race of families and being a family-based race. And the more families we can create, the more loyalty it provides for us as resources to one another, because we can't expect each other to be what we need if we're not doing the qualities that extend in the direction of support. For example, if we're not getting married, so you can't expect a wife out of or a husband out of this demographic. So we have to indoctrinate ourselves with the culture of pro-marriage and more family mentalities if you want to create more families at all. We also need more families because we need a wall of defense against the forces that are constantly disrupting our lives. Because imagine if you were the only person going through the judgment and the discrimination that we endure as a people. It would be very hard, and I don't doubt that you would still go through that same thing, even if it was just the one person that occupied this body. I don't doubt we would still be hated as that one person. But by the grace of God, thank God, that you're not just one person. You have all these other people. We don't have to be in this existential loneliness. We have all these other people that we ought to see as, okay, well, you get it, okay, so how can we work together? And that wall of defense is talked about in the scriptures. The Bible goes into the quiverful, which is talked about in Psalm, and it says, you can stand with the enemies at the gate. Look at the gatekeepers of our reality. They're gatekeeping our resources, they're gatekeeping our prominence, they're gatekeeping the role we play in the economy. And it's easier to do that when you're broken and confused and you don't have a sense of self and unity and they're mind controlling you. But it's harder to do that with a quiverful of families. See, quiverful speaks on the amount of children per family, but it can also be utilized because if it's God speaking on this in general to a group, then it can also be discussed as how many families exist, regardless of their given sizes. And since for genetic and biological reasons, we can't always create massive amounts of families, don't just focus on numbers. Because even if it's a quiver of 3 or whatever the family construct is, each family just existing at all is a blessing to us. We got to stand against those enemies, those gatekeepers, gatekeeping our resources and gatekeeping us even being alive. We got to stand against that. Because if we have more people around, that's less like these forces can get away with everything they want. They can't get away with things because there's too many people and too many eyes on them. It could be a weapon if you're all cut off from each other and you're all alone and you don't know where to go. No. We need to support pair bonding, group bonding, and collective bonding. Wall of defense style. More families, more homes, more people, more lives. The more of us around and the more of us associated with each other and as allies to one another, we got to be protected in that.
For Black people in particular, do you think that we can truly make change as things are right now?
Well, it starts in the home. You know, if the father's not in the home, the boy will find the father in the streets. Yeah, I saw it in my generation and every generation before me and everyone since. It starts in the home. You know, if the streets raise you, then the judge becomes your mother and, you know, and prison becomes your home.
Observe how other populations establish meaning for themselves. Do you notice that they express in group biases for one another? This wouldn't be possible if they didn't have each other's support, or if their bloodline politics weren't used to their benefit. How can we improve the politics of our bloodline?
This bloodline that we're a part of is despised. So if we start pulling the reins and say, okay, since the external side of things is not going to benefit us, doesn't want to, then we got to pull the reins on the race that God birthed us into and say, you know what? I'm putting meaning on this. These are not just whatever the slur or epithet you want to provide them. These are human lives. You put meaning to these children by covering these children in family structures. You put meaning to these women by covering these women in family structures. You put meaning to these men by covering these men in family structures. You put meaning to these people as a collective by doing that at large. In the multi-millions, billions, spreading love, family, unity, and support throughout each other's lives. That's what we ought to do. And we're on a mission to do that so we can take control of our collective identity and then maybe even begin to, as a launching pad, infrastructurally. But it starts with us pulling that rein. And then we also have to understand that it's not just the marital forms of unity that we want to promote. Neighbors, friendships, community, support systems, opportunities, business partners. You notice how other groups, they're so nepotistic. But even if they're not nepotistic on a family basis, there's still biases that they provide each other so that each other can assemble the wealth. They don't just have wealth, they've circulated it throughout themselves, and they've kept it within themselves. They keep it for generations, share it across each other, and that's why there's this wealth gap between not them and themselves. As white against white, it's white against black, because they have the wealth and they gave it to themselves first and only. It was taken, but they had to find a way to keep it. How are we going to find a way to retain the different structural elements? And that's where the bloodline conversations come in, the politics of bloodline. So if we only unified in the household, you'd be tempted to think only your family matters. And we just don't need to get to that point. This is not a hierarchy. This is not a competition. What we have to do is unite the families to families. Even in platonic ways. That people should have wives' clubs, teaching other wives different recipes, teaching wives how to tend to the home, so on and so forth. Whatever the different coalitions, clubs, and alliances we can create, use marriage as a symbol, not just for the couples, but even as a collectivist binary. Because if you're waiting for it to come from the outside, other groups have their own collectivism. But if it comes from the inside, we can make things happen for us. I empathize because I'm in it, but also you are in the shared life form that I'm in, and therefore I want the best for you as I would my own household. That's the premise other groups live on, and that's why they as a group prosper, because it's not individualistic at all.
Other populations operate as a group, whereas the black population is divided on so many levels, including from within the household. Our strategy should be to lessen the gaps between us, and to find ways to retain wealth for our group, not just physical wealth, but raising our social image as well.
There's no demographic on the earth, especially amongst these very successful and prominent and powerful demographics, that operates as individuals. Everything they do is for the sake of their group. That's why if you have a certain name on your application, it's not going to even be considered, because how could this benefit their group? So there's a structural reason why, and it's not a coincidence that other groups in the wealth gap maintain so much power and opportunities. You can call it nepotism, and you can find any other synonym for that, but there is a bias, and it favors the similitude that they all represent. And that's why they work within groupthink. Even if you look at the rest of God's creation in animal life, in nature, you'll see that every animal has its own distinctive group, and they work for the best interests of their groups. That's not selfish, that's not bad, it's just the way that you can maintain your survival.
The cradle of our humanity is first developed through our homes. How we are raised first. Why is our only source of quote empowerment discussed externally, when we create the conundrums through nature versus nurture?
And understanding race means the black family. The, as in the emphasis is on this shared construction of human identity. That's what binds us together. That's what gives us a shared stake and dialogue and politics. The black family is our center. It's the catalyst of our existence. And even if it's broken, it's still the reason you exist. Two life forms that happen to be black. Just because they didn't want to situationally be a part of the family doesn't mean you're not a part of a family somehow. But as time goes on, we need to make it so that this is not any more conditional or subjective. No, this is our value system. We need to make politics around it. We need to make society around it. The black family is our truth. And I know there's differences between each household. Some people, maybe they have Friday night movie night. Some people, maybe they like fast food for dinner. And some people, maybe they like vegetables for dinner. There's different variations of black families. We get that. But the black family is the binding linkage between all these singular black families. And I know each family has their traditions and their hopes and the ways they get along and argue and so on and so forth. But as long as we are all a part of some family somehow, or a part of us as a people somehow, we can still be in the black family. But the aim should be the nuclear family structure.
So when we at the school we just left, out of 600 young men, at least 5 of them, their fathers wasn't in their lives. So let me tell you where that come from. That come from a guy that's broken, and he don't really know how to treat women. And then it comes from a woman who's broken, and her father wasn't in her life, and so she think he cute, and he thinks she cute, and then they get together. And watch this, she end up pregnant, and he not ready to be no father, no husband. So he like, oh man, now they got baby mama drama. Now she raising a young boy or a young girl and the father ain't there. And then when they grow up, the young boy don't really know how to be a man because his father wasn't in his life. Or if it's a young girl, she don't know the value that she has because her father wasn't in her life. And as soon as she meet a young guy and as soon as he meet a cute little girl, they get together and the cycle continues. So I want you to know, that's why I took you there. Because I just left a high school with 600 young African-American men and over 500 of them, their fathers are not in their lives. That's the problem. That's why I came to CSU to tell you. When you meet this, I know she cute, but you gotta ask yourself, are you willing to take care of the child? Are you ready to put a ring on it? Is she wifey material? Like, do you even know anything about her family? But you horny and you sleep with her and now you help add to the system. So I'm asking myself, where are those 500 fathers? Are they dead? Are they in prison? Did they get married somewhere else and marry another family? Like, where are they? I'm looking at 500 young brothers that don't have a dad in their life. That's a problem. And I'm on a mission to help reverse that curse. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got to make the necessary precautions so we not having kids just running around like look, this is God, it's levels to it. And it breaks my heart. I be going to schools, girls be coming up to me talking about my dad is not in my life and why don't he love me? And she crying in my chest and I ain't gonna front, I'm pissed. I'm like, where buddy at? He probably somewhere think he's smooth, think he cute. Somewhere on Instagram, Snapchat, like, you know what I'm saying, kicking it. But his daughter got her face buried in my chest, she's crying. That's the problem. So I'm excited and feel honored to stand before so many young men. But you gotta ask yourself, are you ready to really be men? Or do you want to just be adult males? There's a difference.
Chapter 2. family making.
Let me explain to you something about economics in America, is that we must never forget that economics was the reason that black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. That's what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money, I didn't allow you to have anything on the board, I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa, that was Rosewood. Those are places where we built black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground.
Did you know that racism can affect the chemistry of a child's brain? According to this article entitled "Race Disparities Can Affect Brain Development in Black Children," new study finds. This written on February 2nd, 2023, and I'll pull from the article. It states, "Our research provides substantial evidence of the effects structural racism can have on a child's developing brain, and these small differences may be meaningful for their mental health and well-being through adulthood." The researchers added that those illnesses later in life may include depression, anxiety, substance abuse, suicide, and violence. And it goes on to state that these findings may just be the tip of the iceberg. Considering that racism can affect children's brains, could this mean that we have, as a collective, a series of undiagnosed mental illnesses plaguing our lives? And if we know this can affect our children, what are the ways we're going to stop this so that future generations of our children don't have to be so harmed?
We must fill the earth with our nuclear families. We must take over the modern reproductive chaos so that the two-parent home is our standard. We must change the culture so that families, marriages, and collectivism is our stance. Us, not some, most, not few. We are a group. Let us be united for the greater good.
We have to do a lot more family making because there is a shortage of nuclear families. And that's qualitatively causing us to think that it's somehow normal to reproduce outside of the context of marriage, outside of the context of preparation, value systems, morality. These haphazard reproductive habits are not conducive for the mental health of our offspring. These sons, they need fathers to look up to. These daughters, they need fathers to look up to. These women, they need husbands to support them. These men need wives to nurture them. If everybody's cut off from each other, and think of it like a metaphor such as being out in the cold. The guy is some kind of phantom out somewhere without the love of a family to surround him and nurture him and make him feel safe and cozy. The woman is compromised because she has to constantly work to provide for this family structure. There's no support for her, and even just an emotional support system, not just material, but having someone she can love and who loves her. And the children, they're compromised because the phantom father complex, he's not around. And the mother, she's partially there. So it's this lack of true cohesion, a lack of true kinship that's being developed in these haphazard, broken families. The nuclear family, it covers the needs of everyone, materially, socially, emotionally, and if it were to be compounded upon itself, it could also cover the needs trickling into the larger community. So there's got to be someone that you wouldn't just want to, quote, reproduce with, but someone that you would want to build a family out of. that person is the building block to your future nuclear family, a huge part of your genetic sequence, your bloodline moving forward. Someone that as you make a family out of that person, you could see their genetics as being the blueprint of your offspring. Someone that if you can make a family out of that person, you can see them as being an addition. You would want to introduce them to your parents. They are an addition to your own nuclear family that you were born into. When you look at that person, they feel like family. They're not just someone who looks like your family. They can pass as people in your family, but they are your family. There's a connection that you share that you want to harness their energy. There's a connection that you share that you want to wake up next to that. That person's the person you want to sit at the dinner table with. Get your nice clothes and dress up and go to different gatherings with. This is the person that while you're driving to the gatherings, you can laugh together. This is the person that you just enjoy. So not only are we in the goal of making families out of each other, which of these people illustrate family to you? Because families are meant to be cozy, warm, tender, centers of influence. They're meant to be joy-filled, exciting. That's how I believe God designed them to be, because if he didn't, what would be the incentive in him telling you to make them and at massive rates? To say it's a duty to God for the majority of humans alive, because how else are they going to fulfill the mandate of being fruitful and multiplying? God does not want reproduction out of order. So which of these people is your family? Which of these people is going to be your family member? Which of these people do you have no problem meshing with your siblings, meshing with your parents, meshing with their siblings, meshing with their parents? Because you're situationally bound to these new allies that are going to be alongside of you in your marriage, in their family structure, in your family structure. So which of these people is going to do that for you?
Understand that we will never survive as a group until we get into communities and not neighborhoods. A community is, I control the police, the banks, the schools, the firefighters, and I control the flow of the money. And I have no problem when I go in a Jewish neighborhood and the shop owners are Jewish, and I go into an Italian neighborhood and the shop owners are Italian. I have a problem when I come in a black neighborhood and the shop owners is not me. A Korean has a right to come in and buy my shop for $30 million more than it's worth. That's good business. But if we decide that we're not going to do business with that boy, then he'll have to sell it back, or she'll have to sell it back to a black person for $1 million. Yes. And then the money circulates, and that's how you change. We've been so busy dealing with the hurt and the pain and the misery and glamorizing a hand few that have made it, that we have never really looked at, like they say, your role model. If you haven't got a role model in your house, you should fall on your knees and pray to God, because something is wrong.
Converting realities means we can change strangers into future lineage builders. We need to become such family members. Our collective terms shift to remind us how much of a family we are.
What it means to be a spouse is you're either a husband or you're a wife. And these terms are better because they are terms of endearment, they are legal, they are biblical, and they position the other person as your family. Because there's different realms of family, there's different roles of a family. You have the shared children, you have the spouses, To the children, the spouses are not relevant to them in the same way, so that's mommy and daddy. So how else can we bond ourselves to this other person as a label insisting that this person is ours somehow? This is our family, but in a way that speaks to us making them family, the choice of merging family together. So unlike siblings or parents, where there is this God-given choice given to you, having a spouse reflects your choice in family. The person that you said, that's my family, that's my person, that's my addition. And so the term husband, the term wife, is a term that we don't hear a lot of. And how many wives and husbands should there be in a given population? So many that you hear the term all the time, because that's somebody's wife over there, that's somebody's husband over there. But they all have to have a label that shows the choice that was made in making that person a family. And the more we can hear wife and husband, husband and wife as terms that illustrate someone's role as a family member somewhere in the demographic, the more I believe it subconsciously filters in our brain that one of these people is supposed to play that role. And if it's subconsciously infiltrated in your brain, then it's going to be this norm to think of people as wives, to think of people as husbands. So we can societally shape people by simply giving them the immersion therapy of accumulating names. The more they see something, the more they want to be that, the more they become used to that, and the more they begin to associate people with that. These terms of endearment of husband/wife don't just endear the spouses to one another, but to society it structurally shows us that we value each other's role in the human experience. To society it shows us that this person isn't just there. They play a role in being a resource to another individual. There's no way we can look at the term husband or wife and downplay it. It will always have godly esteem attached to it. In this family-making model, we need to see a world of wives, world of husbands. And you should constantly hear it said that, oh, that's so-and-so's wife, that's so-and-so's husband, or that person for themselves is saying, that's my husband. Person is saying, that's their wife. Whatever the term is, we need to hear that constantly. And it also shows the closeness of the bond, because if that's your wife, that means you're actively engaged in a marital construct with that person.
My question, Bob, is were the same welfare workers dispatched to white neighborhoods as well? And if so, why didn't as many white people start having that same percentage of kids outside of wedlock as blacks did?
Because the social scientists, Cloud and Pivot, after the Watch Riot, targeted black people because they were accessible, and also they were able to define welfare away from social insurance to reparations. So they convinced black folks. Plus, they demonized the nuclear family. They said that the nuclear family is Eurocentric and therefore racist. And they were supported by the women's movement. They was also supported by the Black Power movement. And so the black community was targeted because of the Watch riots and also because of the history of slavery and discrimination. They and their goal, Cloud and Piven said it, they want to promote income redistribution. And the way you promote income redistribution is bankrupt the existing system. So, and they did that. You remember in 73 when New York went bankrupt? John Lindsay was the mayor. So their agenda has been in place for 50 years. And so they separated work from income. The Black Power movement supporters, the women's movement, out of wedlock births began to soar as welfare benefits occurred at a time when the unemployment rate in New York was 4%. So it wasn't in response to any unemployment. It's just that we changed the culture of entitlement. Mm-hmm. Plus, there was a cultural meltdown, too, with the hippies and talking about tune out, get high, turn off. So you've had these terrible combination of forces, but it was driven primarily, it wouldn't have been as effective until the government actually opened offices and recruited people. When the welfare department used to require pregnant women to declare the paternity of the father, ACLU stepped in and filed a lawsuit saying it was a violation of the privacy rights of these moms. They stopped delivering social services to pregnant women because they said it's not a sickness, and so you had this combination, and the liberals who Cloud and Pittman predicted that school dropout rates will occur, drug addiction will occur. All of the things that they predicted in their paper came true.
My guest is Bob Woodson.
Converting terms like they and replacing it with ours. We must start belonging to someone and circulating ourselves and each other as human resources. Our marriages dignify our identities.
And the language of how these people are needs to change from them or they to ours. The reason is because it illustrates kinship versus the further away proximity, because we have a lack of true neighborhoods, true families, true partners. And when you have that lack of systems of human lives, then it's this whole demographic that because they can't use each other in a way that benefits the other person, they become useless to the other person. So we have to change that sense of uselessness and turn it into a useful, need-based resource, because somebody could benefit just by God's design from your genetics. Thus, rather than them or they, you can say, well, that's our people, that's your spouse. You can make a lineage with them. When it's this interdependence of life, then it shows that everybody can have use. In other demographics, they could have families anywhere they live. Their needs are met. Everywhere they go, there's a family or someone who could be made into a family for them. So there's always going to be use. So it's always a circulation of human resources. But with us, the families are out of circulation. So everybody is lacking that family that they could otherwise create. Scarcity disables the wealth of bloodlines. Scarcity disables the wealth of human continuity. It disables the need to benefit from each other. We should be trained to see this person as a potential our versus as a they. You could belong to someone, not just be your own individual person.
Things that's going to help to bring this about is the independence of Africa. One of the only reasons that we in the West have never organized, we have hated our image and our African image. And because Africa has been in the hands of people who have created an image of Africa that's negative and hateful. And it has been hateful to us. We haven't wanted to identify with it. But now that Africa is getting independent and in a position to create its own image, and it's a positive image, those of us in the West look at the African image and see how positive it is. We begin to identify with it. We become proud of Africa, and we become proud of our African blood, our African heritage. And this is what is beginning to make the Africans in the Western Hemisphere today have developed more race pride, and as this race pride develops, then it has a tendency to make us want to unite together and work together, and your Western imperialists and colonialists consider this to be a grave threat.
We must strive towards elevating the nuclear family's reputation. There is a system against our lives that does not want us to exist, be happy, or see us form healthy families and communities. But how do we counter that?
If something is ideal, you're going to want it in abundance. You're not just going to get to the point where you say, well, I'm tired of this really great thing that I've experienced. And so not only are you going to want a family, but if you think it's so great, you're going to want to project that, see that duplicated across other families. It's not this tokenism or the person who feels like they're the only influence that can exist and we're the best family out there and so on and so forth. It has to be something that is majorly spread across many lives. So wherever lives exist and function, if they have that leaning towards desiring a mate, that should be a person that could eventually be filled with a family structure of their own. The amounts of humans that live, that should be 2 times the amounts of families that they could have. Because the family not only increases the population of allies, and not only increases the population of qualitative ideals, but it naturally multiplies that sense of access that we need. Families, think of them as networking tools, because they tie you to a bunch of people that you otherwise could never know, that living by that person couldn't just give you. Because now, because they're your family, they go to your family events. Now, because they're your family, you see them a lot more. You know more about them. So we need to drag these people into our homes, drag these people into our lives and say, no, we're going to bind ourselves to you. Get a person and make a family out of them so that they don't feel so cut off from the human experience. So many of our people, not only are they vulnerable in this system, but they have become victimized because not only are they hated, there's no one around on their behalf that can help protect them from that hated system. God wants people to govern their people. That's why he said in Zephaniah, gather yourselves together, O ye nation not desired. Because when you're gathered and you're clumped up like that, it's a lot difficult to just pluck one of you out and do whatever the system chooses to do. And of course, this concept can ripple not just as individuals benefiting from having family structures, but of course collectively. Because there are many countries of ours all over that are economically being exploited. And the funny thing about this system, it wants to over-exaggerate your differences. It wants to demonize your unity. So it will tell you why you should not unify, more so than it will tell you why you should. It will say, well, you speak different languages, you come from different cultures, or your women do this, or your men do this. That's why you should not unite. Meanwhile, those same people who are telling you those things would never want that for their own collectives. So understand the game that's being played at your expense. Understand that the less unity on any level you have, the better that is for the system. It will never tell you how to thrive, how to awaken, how to unite, how to support yourselves, how to be greater. They will always have different attempts to tell you why you should divide. That's why they'll spend a lot of time and money demonizing you in the media so you won't find each other attractive. That's why they'll never show your families. It's not just historical events like bombing your cities and towns. It's still happening to this day. So we got to fight back that system, make families out of each other. So we could say to that system, listen, this is not a stranger. This is not an enemy. This is not someone that's on the outside and I'm on the inside. This is someone in my cozy home. I associate that person with home life. I associate that person with genetics that I can continue mine with. I associate that person with peace and home. They have the safety net of being related to you somehow. Whether it's your sister, brother, your cousin, your mom, your dad, your husband, your wife, your aunt, your uncle, but it's yours somehow. It's going to have to get to the point where it's your people. Now, how does increasing families make us feel more one? Because per family group, let's say if you have multiple offspring per family. In a family of 7, you have 5 offspring. So that's mom and dad, that's the 2, plus the offspring, and that's the family size. So family of whatever. But for each offspring, if we were to get it to the highly married point, every single one of them has a spouse. Presuming that the offspring spouses have siblings, their siblings has a spouse, and presuming that their siblings' spouses have siblings, their people have a spouse. And as we constantly are merging all these people somehow with us, we're bringing to our forefront of our minds who is part of us.
All right, we're going to go through some affirmations so you can repeat after me. Our marriage will succeed. I don't acknowledge divorce. Our family's wealth will grow beyond our dreams. Our family is rooted in love and progression. Pride and ego will not dwell in our home. I will only focus on the good things about you. You gotta repeat that again. I will only focus on the good things about you. And last but not least, I love you. Awesome. Okay, so you're right.
See, it's just like playing football. It's just like playing basketball. When your team has lost, you better know it. If your team has lost the tournament, you can't go back in the squad room and say, my team has won. If the team has lost, you've got to go back in the squad room, put all the plays on the blackboard, run the cameras back and forward, bring it to a stop. What play did they make, and what play did we not have the counter play to go with? How much did they understand about offense and defense that we failed to understand when we were trying to structure defense and offense? We cannot say we did not lose the tournament and we're the greatest players on the field. Now, what I can say is that we are God's chosen people. We were chosen to be the first people on the planet. We were chosen to be the first people who established family life. We were chosen to be the first people who established civilization and arts and science and engineering. But in the course of cosmic dynamic, the people who were first were brought low. And God said, I made you first. I made you out of all substance. Out of you have come all of the people on this planet. Now I have brought you down, and the challenge is to see, can you rise up again to your glory? But white supremacy and evil has brought us down. And let us understand that we are down. And it's going to be up to all of us and up to all of these young people to see that the black team is going to rise to its heights again. The black team is not going to be chumped because they don't understand what is going on. It is up to every single one of us. There's an African proverb that says, two African proverbs. The first is, when the fool learns the game, it's over. The second African proverb is each one teach one. It is up to us. I don't know whether they do a dance here in Baltimore called the electric slide. Okay. Now people will say, well, Dr. Welsing, how are people going to understand what you're talking about? How do people learn how to do the electric slide? Because he who knows teaches. Each one teaches one. So in the same way, we can help each other understand what the war of white supremacy is all about. So no black person on this planet, and certainly in this area of the world, will be ever again saying what's happening. The only thing we will be saying is we do know what's going on, and I'll see you in the library. You do know what's going on, so we will see each other in the classrooms. We do know what's going on, so we will be serious. And somebody will say, well, when was the last time you saw any black people dancing? Well, they can dance. They're the best dancers on the planet. But during war, the people have to put the records aside and get down into the business of war and studying war so that there can be justice and peace.
Marriage should be our tool used to bind, merge, and network our entire race. Imagine a world where we are filled with so many families. Come on, black people, let us unite.
And it doesn't matter what the family sizes are, but as long as the collective has a lot, that's what matters. I don't believe in a scarcity model. Quality is quantity when it comes to collectivism. The more families, the better the quality of the collective. In any city, whatever the population of that city, there should be the majority of the people in that city married. In every country and in total for our entire demographic, we got to get it so that the majority of black people in the entire race is married. Just imagine how much closer, how much more at peace, how much more we would be as a group if we had more marriages / families. Can't have it so that the whole world hates this one group and then the group hates itself. Where is the refuge? Where is the hiding place? Where is the safe spot? Where is the safe haven if it's surrounded by hate? And that's where the extreme amount of nuclear family is. And each of these families need to ensure they're raising their children in awareness. Anywhere we are on the earth, they don't teach us true history because they know it's volatile, and they know if they were to teach it to you, that would make you more empowered because it will make you see the reality of the world. And it's going to make you think like, oh, we got to unite. So if you're going to make a small-scale rendition of unity via the family, you raise your children with that unity gospel, and teaching them their history can help. Teaching them the truth about this world will help because the system wants to make you think that you don't exist at all, that you never played a role throughout history, that you don't matter at all. And so the system is actually trying to break your minds, break your hearts, break your families, break your lives. So we got to fight back and make the family.
Take fathers out of families, male children will experience male hunger. But because males are socialized to cover up your feelings, don't talk about what hurts, little male children are almost socialized to say, I don't want my daddy, I haven't seen him, it doesn't make any difference. Well, it does make a difference. Male children need their fathers. They need their fathers to hold their hands, to walk with them. You may have some museum area here in Baltimore. Go and look on Saturday. You probably will see white males holding the hands of little 3-year-old white adult males holding the hands of little 3-year-old white males. And in that hand-holding process, male strength is passing out of the arm of the father into the hand of the little boy. and he begins to understand male strength.
Chapter 3. Degrees of Separation, Relatability, and Familiarity.
There's so much power in the black family. It is a place to go for strength. It is a place to go for encouragement. It is an institution that has been able to survive the greatest attacks that has come against the black family. That even in the midst of oppression and a history of slavery that has impacted and separated families, that the black family emerged out of that institution of slavery strong. Because we recognize that family for us is about a kinship, a connectivity, about a grounding of truth, of values that connect us together. It is not always about DNA that describes family, but a family is about a shared ecosystem of values, of love, of camaraderie, of being able to support one another.
This article written on October 12, 2022, entitled, Millions of Americans are losing access to maternal care. Here's what can be done, and it's from NPR. And it states that access to maternity care is decreasing in the parts of the U.S. that need it the most, and that this lack of access affecting, as it states, nearly 7 million women of childbearing age and some 500,000 babies. If you go on throughout the article, it states, and it warns the result is disproportionately harming rural communities and people of color. 1 in 4 Native American babies and 1 in 6 black babies were born in areas with limited or no access to maternity care services. Mothers and babies in maternal care deserts face a higher risk of poor health outcomes, including death. Roughly 900 women died of pregnancy-related causes in the U.S. in 2020, the report says, adding that nearly 2/3 of such deaths are preventable. Knowing that there are maternal care deserts in terms of adequate access, and that 1 in 6 black babies would be affected by this, what are ways that we can potentially counter this difficulty? Do you think this could mean a rise of black women that become doulas or midwives? Because if we're going to have more nuclear families, that means more offspring being born within these families, we have to find ways to counter the structural lack that's affecting many lives. Ideally, we can see better outcomes for many mommies, babies, and fathers, and happy families.
We naturally possess as individuals degrees of separation, relatability, and familiarity, but where these functions become unnatural is where they serve as barriers of human progress. How can we work towards decreasing such functions to gain more awareness, or benefit from each other's lives as allies?
There are degrees of separation between us, degrees of relatability, and degrees of familiarity between us. But where these things become unnatural is when these are barriers that make it difficult for us to properly communicate, strategize, work together for our best interests, support each other. We're acting as if we're a separate species. Degrees of separation, relatability, and familiarity should be seen as how do we decrease those things within human reason.
And tell the story of how we'd overcome. Tonight, I want you to be reminded of the power. that comes from our own experiences with God. That your legacy, your history, the handprint of God's handiwork in your life is a powerful story that must be told to future generations. You must tell them the story of our people. I'm so grateful that PBS this month showcased the story of the Black church. It is important that we sit our families down and tell them the story of the Black church. Not just the story of the Black church, but tell them the story of Black people, and tell them the story of the Black family. Tell them the story of the Black college. Tell them the story of the Black businesses. Tell them the story of how we've overcome. Tell them the story of how God has never let his hand come off of us, but God has kept his hand on us through many dangers, toils, and snares. Now is the time we tell the story of the power and the presence of God in our own lives. Because that, beloved, is what's most important. To the Black family, love first. To the Black family, love second. To the Black family, love again. Let us cherish one another. Let us honor the humanity and the dignity of all persons. And let us begin to fight together, to build together a world that will affirm all of God's children. For we are all tied together in one garment of destiny. And what affects one indirectly affects all of us directly. We are all in this together. We truly are one big family.
Creating kindred requires effort. There are 3 main types of people in our group, and they are defined as strangers, enemies, or neutrals. How can we shift from those norms? If we remain in those 3 functions, we won't be able to come together to establish a more empowered world.
Kinship is created by becoming related. Kinship is established through families. That's actually the definition of kin. There's 3 types of identities within us. There are strangers, enemies, and neutrals. And since everybody's in their own little world, it's making it difficult for us to convene upon the world that we understand to be hurting us and destructive. And so when you are either enemies, neutralized, or strangers, there's no resource that you can get out of each other. There's no way you can circulate ideas and skills. I have a theory about our anti-Black isms, and by isms, think of a word that is tied to superiority or hatred against another group, and it has the word ism in it. So anti-Black isms can be despising another person within the shared race for their form of Blackness. Now, what makes the anti-Black isms strange is that in many cases, that person can either create you or that you could create them. In many cases, they are your genetic reflection. Therefore, if they share your phenotype, there's likely that they share your genotype. I mean, it's not just little things that make us relatable. We're the only group with our hair texture. We're very different from everybody else, and even scientifically, we have more in common with each other than we do anyone else. So you would think that we would naturally see ourselves in that oneness. But the isms perpetuate the idea that you're very different, and that because you're that different, there's no point in the other person's life. When you are texturist, featurist, or colorist, or classist, or whatever the ism is, you are assuming that that person is your enemy. And if we're going to be talking about degrees of separation, familiarity, and relatability, it shouldn't be weaponized as because you're different, then you're not a part of us. that difference is what gives us genetic richness. Because if you were all identical, where's the diversity in that? If your average fridge or pantry has different flavors and different tastes, it's all in that same fridge, it's all in that same pantry, that you can still have a variety of things, but they still make up the same norms. That gives it more. It doesn't take anything away from it. Now, the scarcity model would have you think that the differences are a bad thing, but I believe the differences are qualitatively why, if we expand on them, we could be a civilization of ultimate Black unity, ultimate Black life. They're perpetuated because if you're not making kin out of each other, if you're not making lovers out of each other, if you're not making anything that could bind you together, then where's the incentive in your similitude? Where's the incentive in that other person? You're just going to see them the way they are often presented by everyone else. And see, outside of us, we're hated. But that makes sense in a way because we're not anyone's direct family members, we're not in their lineages, we're not making up their way of life. So there's no incentivism driving them to care. So they are more likely to love themselves, having more families within themselves and having that shared appeal within themselves. But compounded to that externalized hatred is the internalized hatred. You think if we were to have as many families as they do you really think we would have all these isms? Because if one of these people could be your husband, that's any kind of appearance, that's any kind of way of life in terms of culture. If one of these people could be your wife, that's any kind of appearance. Because you can then easily project on the other person what you were born into, something that created you or contributed to your creation. But if you don't have that ability to marry at high rates to where you can see each other as families on many levels, from the optical level to the proximity level to the collective level and all the other levels that make up the different dimensions between us, then really there is no push to eliminate the biases we have. So how do we cross these barriers across culture? Let's really begin that strategy. How do we cross these barriers across the different phenotypes? And so on and so forth. I think we also have to, in these marriages and in these families, have an ideology that supports our existence, makes us want to live and makes us feel the value in being alive. Not just happening to be here, but valuing where we are in the human system.
I want to pray with you tonight. I want to pray with you for your family. I want you to drop in the chat tonight in the comments, the name of your family. I want to pray for you and your family tonight. And I want you to continue to pray for your family. And maybe you need to pray for someone in your family tonight. Maybe you need to text someone in your family tonight. Maybe you wish to pick up the phone and call someone in your family tonight and just tell them, I love you. I'm here for you. I cherish you. I honor you. We may not always agree, but I affirm you because we are family. Lord, in the name of Jesus, we, your children, have gathered once more and again. Thanking you tonight, oh God, for the word that sometimes, God, pushes us and pricks us and pulls us to greater. Thank you tonight for the message to the Black family. We thank you, God, for it is our family that we are going to make strong. It is our family that we are going to reimagine. It is our family that we're going to rebuild because, God, we know that we are not in this by ourselves. For we know, God, that you have created family to be a blessing. It is to be a place where the presence of God would reveal God's self. And so, God, tonight we are praying for our families. We are praying that the evil one, the enemy, God, would take his hand off of the family. That we will affirm our humanity and love each and every person that is a part of our family, even if we do not agree with them, even if they're not in our direct bloodline. But God, they are a part of the family of God. And tonight, we are praying that families would resurge, that families will be able to begin to communicate effectively together, that God, families will begin to find, God, their purpose and their love again. God, we're praying tonight that families will be able to talk to each other again. We're praying tonight that, God, the dissension, the arguments, God, the disagreements over things that have happened in our past, God, that we will be able to heal from it tonight. We will be able to forgive tonight in our family. We will be able to pick up the broken pieces tonight in our family, God. We declare tonight in the name of Jesus that, God, you will restore the joy into our family, God. We are declaring tonight, God, that you will put your hands and meet every need for our families tonight in the name of Jesus. We're praying that our families will be stronger than ever. We're praying tonight that our families will be wiser than ever. And they will be able to build together, God, and we'll be able to fight together. We'll be able to love together, and God will be able to lead together. Because we are family. We are a part of the family of God. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Conscious familiarity means we work towards becoming more empathetic towards one another. We also cannot rely on other groups to see us in the ways we should see ourselves. Empowerment comes from within.
To be conscious about the nature of family. I don't believe simply getting married, even if we were to do that at high rates, makes a demographic, quote, family. Because if you look at how everybody likes to say, oh, we all bleed red, we're all human. Within the human existence, if you have to teach people that you're all human, if you have to beg and plead for even your basic liberties, if you have to play the role as the human that's being exploited and demonized, then it's very difficult to say that we're, quote, all human, because your human experience or your place in the human experience either fails to have empathy or fails to see a shared link. So that shows you that there have to be conscious efforts in establishing what it means to be familiarized. And I think how other groups see us, that's another conversation, and I'm not here to change them or figure them out. I actually believe God wants us to, just like in Zephaniah 2, focus on ourselves. Gather yourselves. Forget so much what the other groups have to say or think, because if we make a conscious effort to create family on different dimensions of self, we don't have to become to us what other groups are to us.
I love you, black people.
I love you, black people.
Black people, I love you. Keep the chain going.
I love you, black people.
I love you, black people. And I want us to show each other constantly, intentionally.
I love you, my black people.
I love you, black people. I got much love for y'all.
I love you, black people. You are important.
I love you, black people.
I love you, black people.
Grand Rising Queens and Kings. Happy Marvelous Monday. Just wanted to say, I love you, black people.
I love you, black people.
I love you, my black people, my highly melanated beings. I highly, extremely love y'all.
I love you, black people.
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 I love you, black people. Mwah.
You know Ike loves you, black people.
I love you, black people.
Love all my black people, gods and goddesses.
I love you, black people. I love the black men. I love my other black sisters and our beautiful children.
I love you, black people. Okay, I like that. I love you, my black people. Let's get it.
I love you, black people.
I love you, black people.
I love you, black people.
I love you, black people. Stay strong, keep moving, and keep supporting one another.
Since the so-called Negro community has shocked the white man by resisting all efforts to divide us, I think that you and I should continue to shock him by staying and working together in unity. Despite religious, political, economic, or educational or social differences, let us remember that we are not brutalized because we're Baptists. We're not brutalized because we're Methodists. We're not brutalized because we're Muslims. We're not brutalized because we're Catholics. We're brutalized because we are black people in America. Who taught you, please, who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself who taught you to hate being what God gave you.
Unity is key. We are one people. Let us love and create more marriages, families, and couples. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Gershly Karen Pierre, and I'm pro-marriage, pro-the nuclear family. Let us unite, let us arise, and let us awaken. We are one people. Stay tuned for more.